Hello, I'm Janice Pulver with York County Mosquito Control, and I'll be talking about trapping for adult mosquitoes. In general, we will be talking about the what, why, when, and where do we trap. For setting traps, it involves the preparation, types of traps, trap setup. For picking up traps, we'll talk about how to take down a trap, trap malfunctions and or tampering, freezing the catches, and helpful tips. Starting out with general information. What do we trap? The traps are designed to catch adult female mosquitoes, but you will also catch male mosquitoes, moths, spiders, midges, crane flies, etc. On the left, you can see some of the cool things you might come across in a trap. Kind of in the middle here is a trap kind of more on the full side of mosquitoes all around the netting. And on the bottom right, this is what we typically see in our gravid traps here in York County. You have some mosquitoes, but you have to pick through a bunch of these other insects to get to them. Why do we trap? We trap to monitor fluctuations of mosquito populations, test for disease, primarily West Nile virus and Eastern equine encephalitis, reduce the mosquito population to make life more comfortable for citizens, have a better understanding of where to look for a larval habitat based off adult catches, collect data, and find new species in the area. On the left here, you can see my boot covered with floodwater mosquitoes. On the bottom is an example of us testing some of our gravid traps for West Nile virus. Where do we trap? We trap to areas close to mosquito breeding habitat, and these can be like woods that have woodland pools. An example of this is in the bottom picture here, near salt marshes, urban areas near containers with standing water, and a big problem we have usually is tires that breed mosquitoes. In the left top here, you can see one of our local tire piles in the county. We can also trap at pump stations, which attract Culex pipiens and Culex restuans. You can trap somewhere hidden to avoid interference from the public. You can see our intern in the top right here showing like a little trail we have to one of our trap sites, but it's fairly covered, you can't really see the trap. And also in shaded areas where mosquitoes tend to rest during the day. When do we trap? We trap from April until October in our area, typically, but it can vary based on the weather and mosquito populations. The time traps are set and picked up vary by municipality, but typically it's less than 24 hours. You'll go set them in the afternoon and pick them up the following morning. This can also be dependent on how long the batteries last. Now we will move on to setting traps. Preparation. Know where you are supposed to be trapping, because that determines what you'll need to bring with you. Enter in trapping data if you're required to. Write out labels for each trap, and that would include the date the trap was set, location, and type of trap. An example of what that would look like is the bottom picture here, that little white square. You're going to gather your trapping supplies, and this includes the traps, of course, CO2 in the form of either dry ice or in tanks, depending on where you work. If you have to make dry ice, you need to go to a tank and make blocks and put them in the coolers. And an example of this is in the top right corner picture. That's us making dry ice. If you're using tanks though, you need to make sure you have enough for the trap event, that the connections are tight and not leaking CO2, and that each tank has enough CO2 in it to last through the night. You're also going to need batteries, baits/lures, and maybe extra parts just in case you forget something or the trap malfunctions while you're out in the field. Set up the trap before you walk into the woods, and this is usually on the tailgate of your truck. It's quicker to fix if there's an issue with it, and it's also less time getting bitten by mosquitoes. The first type of trap we'll talk about is the CDC trap. It uses a 6-volt battery. The attractants are CO2 and a light. Airflow, the mosquitoes get sucked into the trap chamber by a fan that they have to pass through, and because of this, they might be damaged. This trap hangs from a tree and is good for catching woodland and salt marsh species. This is how you're going to set up the trap. You're going to put the label in the catch chamber, attach the catch chamber to the CDC by placing the elastic above the lip, and connect the battery, and make sure to do red to red, black to black. When you're done with all that, you're going to bring all your supplies to the trap site. You're going to place the battery facing up so that the terminals are facing towards the sky. You're going to hang the CDC trap at about eye level, and you're going to hang and open the cooler from the tree like I'm doing here. If you have a tank though, you'll put the tank on the ground horizontal and tie the tubing around the top of the trap. And when you're done setting it up, make sure to double check everything is correct before you walk away. The next type of trap we'll be talking about is the BG. It uses a 12-volt battery primarily, but you could use two 6-volt batteries. You just have to make sure you have the little extra connector. The attractants are CO2 and a BG lure, and it's best not to push the BG lure all the way down on the lid because they can get stuck or hard to take out sometimes. And the placement is on the ground, and they're good for catching container breeding species of mosquitoes. The mosquitoes get sucked into the BG baggie by the fan beneath it, and the air goes back through the lid of the trap, and because these mosquitoes aren't passing through that fan, they're less likely to be damaged. Your city might use rain guards, and these rain guards would help protect the pores on the lid of this trap from getting clogged, which could reduce the airflow of the trap. Also, mosquitoes are kind of difficult to ID when they're wet. To set up a BG, the first thing you're going to do is put the label in the BG baggie and make sure the seams are facing outward. You're going to put the BG baggie around the top lip of the cylinder and then tighten it some. You're going to put it back on the BG. You can push down that cone if you want. And then make sure your cooler is inside and open. And then when you're done checking that, you can close the lid. And then bring your supplies to the trap. If you have a CO2 tank, you're going to bring the tank with you as well. And then when you're walking to and from trap sites, watch out for sticks because you might trip. And then when you're at the trap site, you're going to connect your battery red to red, black to black. And then make sure the fan is running by placing your hand on top to feel the airflow. If you have a CO2 tank, you're going to lay it horizontal on the ground again and feed the tube through the hole on the side and keep pushing it until you get to the step down. The last type of trap we'll be talking about is the Gravid trap, and these operate off of a 6-volt battery. The attractants is smelly water, which is a combination of grass, chicken manure, yeast, and water, and they are usually placed at pump stations, which in themselves smell. The airflow is the air is sucked up from kind of where the water is beneath the trap up into the trap, so the mosquitoes get stuck into this trap chamber and then out to the side of the trap. They're placed on the ground, either by a pump station or an area where there's standing water that's kind of high in organic matter. And these are great for catching gravid female mosquitoes, primarily culex, pipiens, and restuans. And by gravid, that means these female mosquitoes have taken a blood meal and they're ready to lay their egg rafts on top of the water. To set up a gravid trap, the first thing you're going to do is open it and push down the cylinder all the way till it stops. And there's a little rubber thing that prevents it from going any further. You're going to put your label in the trap chamber and then place it around that cylinder and try to get as much netting out of the way as possible. Then you're going to put your 6-volt battery inside and connect it red to red, black to black. After that, you're going to close the lid, gather your supplies, and go to the trap site. An important thing to do is make sure where you place it is level and that the fan is not being blocked by vegetation nearby where you set it. Then you're going to fill it up with your Gravid water, and the water level should be like an inch away from that cylinder from the water. And when you're walking away, make sure everything is working. We have set all our traps, and now we're going to learn about how to pick them up. To take down a CDC trap, you're going to start by tapping the netting on the sides to make any mosquitoes on the netting go further down inside the trap. Then you're going to hold it closed with one hand while trying to tie the string with the other. And this is so the mosquitoes in there won't go back up past where you're trying to tie it off. And after that, you're going to pull it off the CDC trap, disconnect the battery, and start gathering your supplies. So in this, I'm going to take off the cooler hanging from the tree, and then pull the string that's on the tree off the trap, and then take the trap with me, along with the battery on the ground. To take down a BG, you're first going to start by shaking the cylinder to get any mosquitoes kind of closer to the top to go down further into the BG baggie. Then you're going to push down the netting, and then you're going to take the toggle and secure the baggie closed. You're going to put the cylinder back upside down on top of the trap, disconnect the battery, and gather everything and walk out the woods. For a Gravid trap, you're going to find the string, and then you're going to kind of push it close, she'll see here, and then she secures it with the toggle. And then you're also going to make sure it's fully closed by pushing it down and then closing it further. You're going to disconnect the battery, take it out of the trap, close the trap, and then pick up everything. And last, you're going to dump out your Gravid water and try to make sure you don't get it on your boots, because your boots will probably smell the rest of the day. Malfunctions and or tampering. Some malfunction examples is the battery overnight got too low of a voltage or just straight up died. The cooler was never opened, the tank wasn't even turned on, or the tank just ran out of CO2 overnight. And then also something on the trap itself broke. Tampering examples is the trap was moved, maybe a citizen came across it and messed with it. The battery was disconnected, so the trap isn't working, and what it did catch might have been able to fly out. And then maybe your CDC strings were cut, and this has actually happened to us. On the top left is another example of something going wrong with a trap. This is an oviposition trap. We came up to it, and it was broken off and fallen over, and then on the top it just looks like something bit it, so I'm not really sure what happened there. When you get back from picking up all your traps, the first thing you want to do is get your catches in the freezer, or however else your city kills them. And then you want to make sure they are dead before you ID them, and it kind of takes maybe 15 minutes to do so. Well, we find our Gravid trap chambers tend to take longer to die inside. I don't know why, but they do, so I usually leave them a little bit longer inside. But if you do start to ID something and they start like coming back to life a little, just put them back in the freezer and just make sure they're dead. Some helpful tips. The mosquito traps also attract ticks. So before you get back in your truck, just do a quick tick check of like your pants just to make sure there's none on you. And if there are, just pick them off. Try to kill them if you can. You can also use like a lint roller to roll them off you. When you pick up a trap, make sure it has a label associated with it. This is very important, because if you come back and you have multiple of the same traps without a label, it might be hard to figure out exactly where it came from. Do not detach a battery connection by pulling on the wire. Always pull from the spade head. If you pull from the wire, you might end up breaking the trap. And you can put something on top of the Gravid pans when driving so they don't fly out the truck. And make sure the mosquitoes are not squished in transit or in the freezer.